surveying us all. My brother-in-law, Tad, opened his mouth. These shares and the $10 million from Kathy's inheritance will go to the eldest daughter, my wife. Hearing those words, I doubted my own ears. Tad. My sister stood up and faced Tad. What's the matter? You have the right to receive it, don't you? Don't worry, Kathy would be pleased too. Remember, she helped out with the debt repayment before, right? However, that's in normal circumstances, but in your case, it's slightly different, isn't it, right, Michael? Yes. Tad, sorry for the late introduction, but this lawyer, David here, is the executor of Mom's will. The executor of the will. Tad looked at me and the lawyer with a puzzled expression. It's something Mom asked me to do before she passed away. Yes, I have the responsibility to execute the contents of the deceased's will. What does the will say? Don't tell me it says not to let the eldest daughter inherit anything, Tad said with a thin smile. Well, my name is Michael. Approaching my late 50s, I'm entering the latter half of my life. My daughters have grown up and find it more enjoyable to go out with their friends. On weekends, I've started to relax more with just my wife. One sunny afternoon, we were on the terrace, drinking coffee after a meal. The phone rang, and my wife stood up saying, "Yes, yes." The moment she heard the name of the caller, her expression stiffened. Her voice trembled as she responded, clearly disturbed. I stood up to go to her, but then the call ended. Kathy has passed away. Though I knew she didn't have much time left, I couldn't hide my shock at the news. Mom had been hospitalized for a long time. When was the last time we talked? Recently, she had rarely regained consciousness, and the doctor had told us to be prepared. She was diagnosed with her illness and hospitalized about 6 months ago. My wife and I had been taking care of her. Mom, having been widowed early, had raised me single-handedly, so I was the only one she could rely on. I wished I had been more attentive. I wish I had talked more about various things with my mother. Hearing the news of her death brought waves of sadness and regret, but the image of my mother that came to mind was always smiling. As a timid child, I used to come home from school being bullied, and Mom, a strong-willed woman, would get angry and confront the bullies at their homes. The exact opposite of me, who disliked conflicts, but looking at me, Mom would always say with a smile, "You are just like your father." I was often saved by my mother's strength, and even as an adult, she remained an imposing figure in my life. Mom was strict and strong, but she raised me with great love. Now that I have my own family, I understand how tough it was for her to do it all alone. I had an older sister, Emily, but she had left home a long time ago and we had lost touch. However, I needed to somehow contact her to inform her of Mom's death. First, I called Mom's lawyer. After the hectic days of funeral preparations ended, Mom's ashes were brought back to our home. That day, relatives paid a condolence visit to Mom, who had returned home. Just as the lawyer who had been taking care of Mom arrived, we were about to discuss the will. The doorbell rang. My wife went to the door, but before she could open it, a loud, coarse voice called out, "Excuse the intrusion," accompanied by impolite, heavy footsteps. "Oh, everyone's here." The visitor in the living room was a man. "Planning the inheritance behind our backs, are you, Tad?" I couldn't hide my surprise at the sudden appearance of my brother-in-law. He sat down heavily on a nearby sofa, as if it was his own house. Behind the boastful Tad, Emily appeared timidly. "Michael, it's been a long time." My sister, whom I hadn't seen in over a decade, had changed so much that she was almost unrecognizable. Once gentle and known for her bright smile, she now looked lifeless, with poor complexion and appeared much older than her actual age. Seeing my sister like this, I was shaken. "Sis, you came. Thank you for letting me know," Sorry I couldn't make it to the funeral." Saying this, Emily looked down, seemingly apologetic. I had many things I wanted to ask, but words were hard to find after not seeing her for 10 years. "Anyway, it's a shame about Kathy. She left quite a sum, didn't she? The stocks must have done well too, right?" Tad said to me with a sleazy grin. "How can you say that?" When scolded by my sister, Tad glared at her. "What? It's the truth, isn't it? Especially since you never did a thing to show parental gratitude. Poor thing." "That's because you..." Emily seemed about to retort, but quickly closed her mouth. Tad laughed through his nose and said, "Come on, light an incense stick at least. Sorry for being a disobedient daughter." Emily, holding back something, tightly closed her mouth and sat down in front of Mom's ashes. Mom's family was originally wealthy. When she married Dad, her parents opposed it, and she was almost estranged from her family. After Dad died, she refused financial assistance from her family and raised us on her own. But when Mom's parents passed away, a huge inheritance came to her, being an only child. Stocks and cash totaled to about $10 million. "Having it now is somewhat pointless," Mom used to say. "There's no harm in having it. You should use it however you like, Mom," I told her. I was already married and supporting myself, and Emily had left home a long time ago. Emily, though, Mom was worried about my sister. It had been a long time since Emily got married. Initially, we kept in touch, but there had been no word from her in recent years. She stopped visiting even during the holidays. "If something happens to me, take care of Emily. Siblings should help each other." "Yeah, I understand." But the contact details I had for my sister were no longer valid, and I had no idea where she was or what she was doing. Mom's words had always left me concerned about my sister, Emily. After reuniting with her after such a long time and with so much to catch up on, it seemed now wasn't the right moment. "Mom," muttering, Emily had been joining her hands for a long time when Tad, with an exaggerated sigh, said to her, "How long are you going to stay absorbed in this?" He seemed to have no intention of joining his hands, lounging on the sofa instead. "What are you doing here all of a sudden?" My wife, seemingly running out of patience, asked Tad. Tad's attitude had probably been irking her for a while. "What? You're talking to me like that?" Tad said and glared at her. My wife looked like she wanted to say something, frowning. "Well, never mind. Are all the relatives here?" Surveying us all, Tad opened his mouth. "These shares and Kathy's inheritance of $10 million will go to the eldest daughter, my wife." Hearing those words, I doubted my own ears. "Tad." Emily stood up to face Tad. "What's wrong? You have the right to receive it, don't you? Don't worry, Kathy would be happy about it. Didn't she help out with the debt repayment before? The agreement was different. You said that was the end of it when she arranged the money. Tons of money is there, so a little bit should be fine. A senile old woman didn't need that much money." I grimaced at the horrible things he said about Mom. Emily, looking like she might cry, shouted, "Stop it. I don't deserve a single penny. But, you know, as the eldest daughter, you have the right to inherit, right, lawyer?" Tad said with a sleazy smile. "Yes, usually, siblings inherit when a parent dies. See, as the eldest, you have to inherit. Be thankful for the $10 million. $10 million. Tad laughed with a vulgar snigger. "However, that's in normal cases, but in your case, it's a bit different, isn't it, right, Michael?" "Jess." "Tad, sorry for the late introduction, but this lawyer, David, is the executor of Mom's will." "The executor of the will?" Tad looked at me and David with a puzzled expression. "Mom asked me to do it before she passed away." "Yes. I have the responsibility to execute the contents of the deceased's will." "What's in the will? It doesn't say to not let the eldest daughter inherit, does it?" Tad said with a thin smile. Yes, she's excluded from the inheritance, so that seems to be the case. At the dumbfounded expression on Tad's face, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Soon, the other relatives in the room also started laughing. What does that mean? Tad, confused, confronted the lawyer. Disinheritance means if there's serious misconduct by the designated heir, they can be stripped of their right to inherit. Stripped. Tad looked pale as he stared at the lawyer. Oh, what a pity, my wife mockingly said to Tad, almost as if returning the favor. Seeing this, the relatives all laughed together. By the way, if you are disinherited, you also can't receive the reserved portion, the minimum inheritance right. Hearing this, Tad turned to Emily with an almost aggressive tone. Hey, did you know about this? I don't know. We haven't been in touch for a long time, Emily exclaimed. That's impossible. You, Tad, had a large debt paid off by the deceased during her lifetime, said David, causing Tad's gaze to shift uneasily. She did it on her own. What, that was you who forced? Shut up, Tad yelled, causing Emily to flinch. Damn it, I was tricked. I married her thinking her family was rich. Such a way to speak. Emily was shocked by Tad's words. Tad's anger, believing he was entitled to the inheritance, seemed to be directed entirely at Emily. Damn it, everyone's making a fool of me. In frustration, Tad kicked a nearby chair, and Emily shrank back in fear. Watching Emily, I remembered Mom's words. I had to do what I was supposed to do. I needed to convey Mom's feelings properly to Emily. Sis, I said, placing my hand on Emily's shoulder. Her frame felt much smaller than when I last saw her. Mom always said, help each other as siblings. I had first heard about Mom excluding Emily from the inheritance when Mom's hospitalization was decided. When I asked why, Mom said she had concerns. When she heard about Emily's large debt, she thought Emily's behavior was strange. Given Emily's serious nature, getting into debt was an abnormal situation for our family. But Mom didn't ask for reasons. She simply paid off the debt without asking anything. However, after that, Emily became unreachable. Mom tried to contact her, but couldn't get through. It was the same with the contact details I had. Mom was always worried that something might have happened to Emily. Both of you didn't take after me, Mom said, looking at me with kind eyes. Remember, when Emily was in elementary school, once, Emily's return from school was delayed, worrying Mom and me, so we went looking for her. We found her alone in a dark park, crying, "The cat won't get off my lap." When I asked why she didn't move it, she said, "But then I'd wake it up, and I just couldn't argue with that." She waited there, missing dinner, until the cat woke up. I would have moved it no matter what. Unbelievable. Mom laughed. But then she grew contemplative. She's too kind. Mom's worry seemed to be rooted there. Is she having trouble with her husband? Well, if she's happy and choosing to be with him, that's fine. But if she's forcing herself, Mom seemed to have a plan. If it's just about money, he will surely come after my inheritance, saying, as the eldest daughter, she has the right to inherit. So, Tad will say that's why you're disinheriting. Won't Emily be shocked? I said that at the time, but in the end, things turned out just as Mom had predicted. Indeed, mothers are incredible. When I die, tell her, I want to help Emily, Mom said, seeming to have made up her mind. Just saying that, will she understand? She's smart, she'll be fine. Siblings should help each other, please, Michael. I agreed with Mom's thoughts, and that brings us to today. After hearing my story, Emily covered her face with her hands. Mom was always worried about you, Emily. Emily knelt in front of Mom's ashes, crying. Meanwhile, Tad was trembling with anger after hearing the story. What's this about siblings helping each other? Not giving me a penny. If you wanted to help, you should have given me the money. That's not it, Tad, Emily said, her expression different from before. She faced him squarely, with a firm attitude. What? You're the eldest daughter and you can't inherit. Aren't you upset? Everything's going to this brother of yours. Yes, I don't need the inheritance. I couldn't do anything for Mom. David, regarding the inheritance, I have nothing to say, but I have one request. What is it? Emily spoke with a clear, determined gaze. I would like to discuss filing for divorce. What are you talking about now? Tad was flustered by Emily's sudden declaration. I should have made up my mind when you had the debt paid off. I no longer have any inheritance to claim. If it's just the money you want, please divorce me. Emily, do you know how much I've done for you? Tad said, approaching Emily menacingly. Then, Emily said to him, Thank you for everything until now. As Emily said resolutely, Tad looked down on her with cold eyes. Right, if I can't get the inheritance, there's no point in being with you. A penniless old woman, I don't need you. Marrying you was a mistake. Emily didn't respond to Tad's abusive words. Witnessing this, David spoke up. Emily, about the divorce, does your husband always behave violently like this? I'm not sure if it's violent, but Emily seemed to be deep in thought. Does your husband often blame or criticize your actions? Yes, but that's because I don't understand him well enough. Emily, for some reason, seemed to defend Tad. Her expression was one of slight agitation. To me, it was clear that Tad was selfishly attacking her. And it wasn't just apparent to me. All the relatives present could see this fact clearly. I felt like I understood what Mom had been worried about. If you can't have an equal conversation, or if you're always afraid of your husband's words and actions, that's already a form of violence, David said. At his words, Tad became furious. What? Violence? Nonsense, you phony lawyer. Emily looked back and forth between the shouting Tad and David, her eyes showing determination. Seemingly understanding Emily's heart, David continued without paying attention to Tad's words. All of us here are witnesses to this. It's not a recording, but if you have a diary or something that details these violent behaviors, that would be helpful. I have a diary. There are days when I've written in detail. Good. Then we'll talk more about the divorce mediation later. Could you come to my office? David said, handing Emily his business card. Thank you, I appreciate your help, Emily replied, and then she turned to resume the conversation as if Tad was no longer of any concern to her. In the midst of the exchange between Emily and David, Tad tried to intervene but was unable to stop them. Hey, don't joke around. I did everything thinking of you. Are you repaying kindness with ingratitude? Tad raged. Emily, with a resolute attitude, replied to him. Please be quiet for a moment. I've decided not to give in to you anymore. Months later, Emily and Tad's divorce was finalized. Emily gathered evidence and bravely confronted Tad. Though it might have taken longer if Tad hadn't agreed to the divorce, fortunately, he quickly withdrew. Emily was astounded. He really just wanted the money. Tad paid alimony to Emily and left the house they lived in. Emily, already living elsewhere, would likely never see Tad again. The last time she saw Tad was at the mediation, where he apparently said nothing to her, mindful of the judge's impression. The once domineering man had become meek as a lamb, making Emily wonder what she had been afraid of. Finally, I could tell Emily the truth. About the bequest. A bequest means that even non-heirs can receive property. In other words, I could share Mom's estate, which I had inherited, with Emily. This was also Mom's intention, which I had heard during her lifetime. I was waiting for Emily's divorce to be finalized. This way, Tad wouldn't get a penny, and I could give Mom's inheritance to Emily. It was a farewell gift for her new life. Such, I don't deserve that. Emily was surprised and confused by my sudden offer. Mom told me to do it. We can't ignore the wishes of the deceased. She wanted siblings to help each other, I said with a smile. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she said, "Thank you." Then, she turned towards the altar and prayed. "Mom, thank you. I'm sorry for worrying you." I looked at the photo of Mom on the altar. She had a bright, cheerful smile. It seemed as if she was saying, "I'm glad. Welcome, and thank you for coming." Emily, congratulations on the opening. Congratulations on your new cafe. Today was the opening day of the cafe Emily had started. My wife and I brought a gift to celebrate the opening. The stylish and serene cafe was already bustling with customers. Emily used part of Mom's inheritance to start the cafe, something she had dreamt of for a long time. Post-divorce, she wanted to try pursuing her long-held dream. Emily's demeanor was lively and cheerful as she served customers. It was like the Emily of the past had returned. "It's a nice place. It feels comforting," I said. "Thank you. Hey Michael, remember that painting?" Emily pointed. I looked where she indicated, seeing a framed painting. That was in Mom's room. It was a favorite painting of Mom's that Emily and I often looked at in our childhood. Though not very expensive, Mom had always treasured and kept it. Yes, I got Mom's favorite painting to display here. Nostalgic. I think Mom would be happy. Standing next to Emily, looking at the painting, I felt as if we had time traveled back to our childhood. Our eyes met as she smiled beside me. Emily's eyes no longer held the darkness they did on that day. "Something on your mind?" "No, just thinking maybe I should start something new too." "Oh, that would be wonderful." Seeing Emily's bright smile, I silently spoke to Mom in my heart. "It's okay now." The cafe doorbell chimed again as another customer walked in. A refreshing breeze swept through the cafe. Emily's bright voice echoed, and I squinted in the dazzling sunlight. I'm off. As I open the front door and call out to my mom, I start walking towards the train station. It takes about 10 minutes to walk from home to the station, even at a leisurely pace. I could ride my bike to the station, but it's easier to walk down the stairs in the park along the way, so I usually walk. Walking my usual route at my usual time, I meet the same people in the same places and exchange greetings. I'm naturally friendly and always smiling, so people often strike up conversations with me, and it has become a daily routine to chat with someone. My name is Ken, a 30-year-old single office worker. After graduating from a regional university, I returned to my hometown and now live with my parents and grandmother, a family of 4. Being an only child and having working parents, I grew up close to my grandma, and even when I was living alone in university, I always looked forward to her visits. Whenever she visited, I would take her to tourist spots and nice restaurants as a way of repaying her for raising me when I was little. Initially, it was meant as a way to repay her, but eventually, I found joy in seeing her happy face, and I remember looking forward to her visits. In my university days, learning that my grandma felt lonely when I was away, I decided to find a job close to home and was luckily hired by my current company. My grandmother was very happy about this and now looks forward to taking care of her great-grandchildren, though it seems I won't be able to fulfill that expectation anytime soon. Because my grandma lives with us, whenever I see an elderly person struggling with heavy bags on the street, I can't help but assist them. This has occasionally led to me being late for work. My previous boss was understanding and overlooked my tardiness, but the new boss, George, does not tolerate it. "What, you're late again?" George's voice echoes in the silent office during the morning assembly. "I'm sorry. I saw an elderly person with heavy bags at the crosswalk, and as I helped them and we started to cross, the pedestrian signal began to blink. I carried their bags to the station, and that's why I'm late. I explained with a smile and a scratch of my head. As usual, my colleagues laugh, knowing it's typical of me, but George slams his desk and yells, "Don't smile and shrug it off. It's not just you're late. How many years have you been a working adult? Being punctual is basic common sense. The previous boss might have let it slide, but I won't. Everyone listen up. Tighten up your act." George's shouting makes not only me but also my colleagues tense up. "I'm sorry. I'll be more careful from now on. I apologize on the spot, but I don't plan to stop helping people in need. I just decide to change the time I catch the train, leaving home 30 minutes earlier from the next day." The next day, waking up 30 minutes earlier and getting ready for work, my mom hurriedly prepares breakfast. "Are you going to work already? It's earlier than usual." "Yesterday, I was late because I helped an elderly person with their bags to the station and got scolded by George. I can't stop helping people, so I thought I'd leave home earlier." "You're as kind as ever. Grandma's influence, I guess," she says. After finishing the breakfast she prepared, I head to the station, but leaving just 30 minutes earlier makes everything feel different. The people I meet and the scenery. I miss the daily greetings with the people I used to meet, but I can't afford to be late for work anymore. When I arrive at the office, my colleagues are surprised by my early arrival. "Hey, aren't you at the office earlier than usual? I got scolded by George yesterday." "It's not like you were late because of your fault, right? Well, knowing you, if you see someone in trouble, you'll help them. So you adjusted your time to come in earlier, huh?" "Exactly. I can't ignore someone in trouble." As we talk, George stands behind us and comments, "Good Samaritan, if you're late, it affects your personal evaluation. Your performance is already low. Before helping others, improve your own skills. I end up doing the work you can't handle. Think about how it affects others." He then heads to his desk. A month passes, and I've gotten used to arriving 30 minutes earlier. One day, while waiting at a crosswalk near the company's nearest station, I witness a car accident right in front of me. The car, attempting to enter a convenience store, misjudges the turn, hits the curb, and bounces high. Probably startled, the driver meant to brake but accidentally steps on the gas instead, making a loud engine noise and accelerating towards the store. "Watch out!" I shout, and the car brakes suddenly, colliding with another parked car. White steam rises from the out-of-control vehicle, and the airbags seem to have deployed. I rush to the car and speak to the driver, who responds. Looking into the hit car, I see no one inside, so I check with the driver of the accident car if they need an ambulance. The owner of the hit car comes out of the store, yelling, "What have you done? It's a brand new car. It wasn't intentional, and right now, her condition is more important," I say while addressing the driver in the car. "Are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere? Should I call an ambulance?" To my barrage of questions, she replies, "I'm fine. Thank you for your concern." Her voice was trembling. "I'll call the police right away. If you feel any pain, let me know and I'll call an ambulance." "Thank you. I need to apologize to the person whose car I hit." Saying this, the woman gets out of her car. As she steps out, her stunning beauty takes the breath away of the gathered crowd, and the owner of the car she hit quickly changes his attitude. "It's a new car, isn't it? I'm terribly sorry for my mistake in driving," she says, her eyes tearing up as she apologizes. The owner replies, "Are you hurt? Don't worry about the car, it can be fixed." The man is visibly smitten by her. I watch this from the corner of my eye while calling the police and arranging for their arrival. When I call the police, they ask the reporter to stay at the scene, so I decide to wait for them. Looking at the time, I realize I can still make it to work, so I haven't called in yet. "Thank you very much. If you hadn't shouted, things could have been much worse. My name is Jessica," she introduces herself. "I'm glad you're not hurt. Have you contacted your insurance company yet?" No, not yet. This is my first time being in an accident, so I'm not sure what to do. I called my mom, and she said she'd send someone over. I advised Jessica to contact her insurance company and wait for the police. The police are taking a while to arrive, perhaps due to traffic, and I start to feel anxious. Deciding to call the office, I had the bad luck of George answering the phone. "Good morning. This is Ken. There's been a traffic accident near the convenience store close to the office. I called the police, and they asked me to stay on the scene. The police haven't arrived yet, so I think I'll be late." George responds insensitively. "Do you always make excuses like this? It's because you always stick your nose in such matters. I don't trust what you say. Which convenience store is it?" I murked but reply, "It's the one halfway between the office and the station." "Fine. Stay there, I'm coming over," he says and hands up. After a while, the police arrive, and Jessica and I are separately questioned. A crowd of onlookers gathers, and the police seem to be instructing them not to get too close. After the questioning, while talking to Jessica, George arrives and says, "So the accident was real, but a good-natured incompetent like you is no longer needed. Once you're done here, go home." George says this while looking at me. Hearing this, Jessica says, "I'm sorry, it's because of me." I'm shocked and at a loss for words. "It's okay. It's my fault for being late," I reply. Overhearing George's words, the onlookers react. "How can you say something like that? This man was helping people. Which company fires someone for that?" Other onlookers chime in. "That's right. If he hadn't shouted, things would have been worse. He was proactive in dealing with the aftermath, too." "What are you saying without having seen anything?" Surrounded by the crowd, George looks flustered and quickly heads back to the office. Then, one of the onlookers offers, "Are you really going to be fired? If it's okay, I can introduce you to another job." They offer their contact information, and others also volunteer to help. I thank them and am about to leave when Jessica says, "Could you wait a bit longer? My parents are on their way, and I really want to thank you. I can settle down knowing I'm the reason you're being fired." "No need for thanks. I just did the right thing." The wrong one is George. My previous boss used to praise me. George and I just don't see eye to eye, and it's crazy he could say such a thing in this situation. I unusually speak with a firm tone. As the police finish their investigation and the onlookers start to disperse, a group of people approaches. One of them spots Jessica and comes over. "Jessica, are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine. Please prioritize the repair and replacement car for the person I hit," she says, introducing the car owner. The man apologizes to the owner, and they exchange contact information and discuss compensation. Then, people who appear to be her parents arrive. They are looking like the epitome of elegance and wealth. Her mother rushes to Jessica. "Are you all right, Jessica? Are you injured?" She looks at Jessica with almost tearful eyes. "Mom, I'm sorry for worrying you. I'm not injured at all. I feel terrible for hitting someone's car, but there's someone else I feel even more sorry for," she says, looking at me. Being stared at by Jessica, I blushed and hurriedly said, No, don't worry about it. I was already thinking about quitting because of that boss, so I would have left sooner or later anyway." What do you mean?" Jessica's father asked her. "When the accident happened, he was the first one to come over and talk to me. He called the police for me and stayed by my side so I wasn't alone. He also advised me to contact the insurance company." Jessica explained what happened after the accident, saying, "It seemed we were told to stay here until the police arrived, but because of that, it looked like he was going to be late. His boss came here, and right on the spot, he said he was fired and went back to the office." Jessica, teary-eyed, explained how I ended up being fired. "I see. I understand the situation, but it's unacceptable to fire someone for helping others, if it's not too much trouble." "Could you tell me the name of the company you work for?" her father asked, but I didn't feel like disclosing a company name. The company has nothing to do with this. Refusing to mention the company's name, her dad noticed the company pin badge on my suit's lapel and said, "So, you're an employee of our company." Jessica and I exchanged glances. President Smith, the pin you are wearing is our company's emblem. I'm not the president, but the owner, he said with a smile. Thank goodness, Dad. Please help Ken. He's not at fault, Jessica implored, smiling at Owner Johnson, the owner. However, Owner Johnson said, I'd like to help, but first, we need to understand why George said what he did. It's inappropriate for me, as the owner, to directly intervene. We need to investigate. Do you often arrive late? He asked. I explained my reasons for being late in the past. I see. You've been late because you were helping people in need. You mentioned earlier, and I agree, your actions weren't wrong. I could talk to President Smith and change the company rules, but first, we need to rescind your dismissal. Owner Johnson was willing to help, but I replied, as long as George is my direct boss, I don't want to return. Even if George is transferred, it would be a hassle for him, so I'd rather resign and find another job. I don't want to lose an employee like you. I own other companies. Perhaps you could work at one of those, he suggested. I appreciate your offer, but are your other companies within commuting distance from my home? I inquired, mentioning my grandmother and my desire to work near my home. I understand you're devoted to your grandmother, but unfortunately, the only company of mine within your commuting range is your current workplace. As I said earlier, I don't want to lose an employee like you. Returning to your current company would be best. I won't let you be treated unfairly. So please reconsider, he urged. I understand. However, I'm not confident I can meet your expectations. I think I'll head home for today. Jessica, this isn't your fault. Please don't feel responsible, I said and headed home. When I got home, it was just before noon, and I could see my grandmother weeding the garden. I talked to my grandma. Grandma, I'm home. Thanks for weeding. How about we go for lunch? After I finish eating, I can help you with the weeding, I called out to her. Surprised by my sudden return, my grandmother stood up, looking towards the source of my voice. Oh, you are home early today. Are you feeling unwell? She asked, her face showing both happiness and concern. She approaches me at the front door with a complicated look on his face. No, I didn't go to the office. There was a traffic accident, and while I was dealing with that, it seems I upset George. So, I decided to head home for the day. Seeing my dejected demeanor, my grandmother said, I see, that must have been tough. Well, today, I will treat you. So let's eat lots of delicious food, she said, welcoming me at the entrance. Classic grandma, always knowing how to handle me. I laughed, and we both entered the house, getting ready to leave. Having a meal with just my grandmother was a rare and enjoyable occasion. Her gentle manner of speaking and responses were amusing, and by the time we reached the restaurant, I felt much better and more energetic. After we finished a hearty steak, I took care of the bill and left the restaurant. Grandma was going to pay, she protested, trying to give me money. It's okay, Grandma. We ate a lot, so we need to exercise. Let's weed the garden together when we get back, I said, opening the passenger door for her as I was moving to the driver's seat. Jessica approached, waving her hand. She seemed to have been out with her mother. Is this lady your grandmother, Ken? Yes, she's my grandma. I invited her for lunch after seeing her weeding the garden when I got home. Really, she's such a lovely grandmother. And look at you, opening the car door for her like a true gentleman, Jessica said with a smile. My grandmother, surprised to see me talking to a beautiful woman, had her eyes wide open. May I say hello to your grandmother? Jessica asked, and though surprised, I responded, sure, while opening the passenger door. Grandma, this is Jessica. She wanted to greet you. As I spoke, my grandmother tried to get out of the car. No, Grandma, you can stay seated. My name is Jessica. I was helped by Ken this morning. She introduced herself. Oh, is that so? I thought you were Ken's girlfriend and got quite surprised. Ken has been kind since he was little. He's my pride and joy, my grandmother said. Jessica replied, I heard from Ken that he was raised by his grandmother. He's really grateful for that. Then, to my surprise, my grandmother said, oh dear, is that so? I haven't done much. I keep saying I want to see my great-grandchildren soon. You're too good for Ken. Maybe there's someone better for you out there. Grandma, what are you saying such things all of a sudden? I interjected, a bit embarrassed. Jessica then playfully said, what? Ken doesn't have a girlfriend. Then, I might just have to apply for the position. Shocked by her comment, I quickly said, Jessica, please don't say things like that, even as a joke. Grandma might take you seriously. Grandma, let's go home and do some weeding. Well, Jessica, we're heading back now. After closing the passenger door, I took my seat in the driver's seat. As I drove off, I saw Jessica in the rearview mirror, waving until my car was out of sight. During the drive back, Grandma talked non-stop about Jessica, even sharing the story with my parents at dinner. I wish I had seen her. She seems to be Grandma's favorite, my mother commented. How did you meet her? My father inquired. I told my family about the morning's events, but the conversation turned tense when it came to my dismissal. That George at your company, isn't something wrong with him? What are you going to do from tomorrow? My father asked. There's no reason for you to be fired. What's the name of that manager? I'll call your company tomorrow and give them a piece of my mind, my mother said. They were visibly upset. Then I explained that Jessica's father was the owner of my company and that he offered to let me work at another one of his companies, but none were within commuting distance. Hearing this, my grandmother, who had been quietly sipping her tea, sadly asked, Ken, are you going to leave home again? Don't worry, Grandma. I turned down the offer because the companies are too far. I'll find a job that I can commute to from here, I reassured her. Hearing that, Grandma seemed relieved and sipped her tea again. Even though you did nothing wrong, why should you have to quit? I'm really upset about the idea of you quitting. That's right. The one who should be quitting is George. Both of them seemed quite worked up, so I calmed my parents down. Okay, both of you relax. I'll check how things are tomorrow. I'll contact a colleague and see what the atmosphere is like. I'll let you know tomorrow night, so don't be so angry. I went to my room, called my colleague, and told them about what George had said and that I would take the day off tomorrow. Then, my colleague called me. Hey, tough day. George left abruptly, so I was wondering where he went off to. He acted like nothing happened at work today. I'll let you know if I find out anything tomorrow. After saying that, he hung up. I lay in bed thinking about looking for a new job, but also remembered what Jessica had said to Grandma. Me, her boyfriend. That's clearly just lip service. What am I expecting? But Jessica, she's really beautiful. Rich and beautiful. It's a world too different for me to be a part of. Muttering this, I stared at the ceiling, and before I knew it, I had fallen asleep. I woke up in a panic to find it was the middle of the night and thought of going back to sleep, but I couldn't stop thinking about Jessica. Eventually, morning came, and I spent the morning sitting on the living room sofa in a daze. Then, Grandma sat next to me and asked seriously, Ken, are you okay? Are you lovesick? Lovesick? For a moment, I didn't understand what she was talking about, but then I burst into laughter when I realized what she meant. Lovesick? Grandma, I didn't get what you meant at first. Jessica is out of my league. She wouldn't be with someone like me. What she said yesterday was just her being kind. It got my heart racing, but she and I live in different worlds. Is that so? She's from a different world, like a foreign girl. Hearing this, I didn't want to drag the conversation out any longer, so I told her I was going for a walk to clear my head and left the house. Walking around the neighborhood on a weekday morning, something I hadn't done in years, I got greeted by many people. Most of them were elderly neighbors, all of whom I had helped with carrying things or other favors in the past, and they thanked me again for those times. I might have been fired for being too kind, but I felt reassured that I hadn't done anything wrong. As I was thinking of heading back, I received a text from my colleague. George was taken to the president's office by our manager, Connor. I think it's about your dismissal, the text said. Thanks for letting me know. If you hear anything more after George returns, please contact me, I replied, feeling a bit nervous. Back in my room, I kept glancing at my phone, anxious about any further messages from my colleague. Exhausted from lack of sleep and restless feelings, I fidgeted with frustration. Then, the notification sound for an email went off again. I checked my phone and read the email from my colleague. George came back. I gave your phone number to Connor when he asked for it, so he might call you soon. The email read, and just as I finished reading it, my cell phone rang. It's from the company, probably Connor, I thought as I answered the phone, and indeed, it was Connor. Ken, right. George seems to have fired you, but the company does not acknowledge that fact. After all, a manager does not have the authority to fire an employee. Please come to work as usual from tomorrow. I asked Connor in response to his words, what will happen to George? Kind as the rumors say, aren't you? Worrying about someone like him. He has requested a transfer, so we've decided to move him to another department from tomorrow. The manager's position will be vacant for a while, so I likely take over. Do you have any objections to me doing so? Connor said with a laugh. No, that's fine. I'll come to work from tomorrow. I hung up the phone and reported the news to my mother and grandmother, who were preparing dinner. My mother, looking relieved yet busy, said happily, that's good, or rather, it's only natural. Bring your suit and shirt, I'll iron them for you. At dinner, I told my father that I would be returning to work tomorrow, and he seemed relieved. As I was preparing for work in my room, an unknown number appeared on my phone and it rang. I wondered who it could be, and when I answered, it was Jessica. Hello, it's Jessica. I'm glad to hear you're returning to work tomorrow. How did you know that? My father heard from President Smith. Your kindness is well known at the company. I'm truly happy. Jessica seemed to be at a loss for words, so I said, please thank your father for his help. My staying at the company also spares you from feeling responsible. Now, everything seems to be settling down, so don't worry. Don't say such sad things. If it's not too much trouble for Ken, I would like to continue calling you as a friend. I was momentarily taken aback by Jessica's words but regained my composure at the word friend. Is that so? Then, please let's continue as friends. I'll be returning to work energetically from tomorrow. Thank you for the call. Good night. I hung up and went to get the suit and shirt that my mother had ironed for me. I switched my mindset for the return to work tomorrow and decided not to think about Jessica anymore. The next day, when I went to work, colleagues who knew the situation approached me one after another, and I felt glad to be back at the company. Then, Connor called me. Thank you for coming in. Join me in the president's office at 10 o'clock. It seems that the president wants to confirm if what George said is consistent with what happened. Understood. I replied and, when the time came, went to the president's office with Connor. You're Ken, the one who helped the daughter of owner Johnson, President Smith said, and as soon as I entered the room, and Connor seemed surprised to hear this. So that's what it was. That's how President Smith came to hear about Ken's situation. Connor seemed convinced. I've heard from owner Johnson, so I understand the situation to some extent. It's troubling for me if an employee like you leaves. Please continue to help those in need without worry. I'm thinking of changing the company's internal rules regarding tardiness. I want other employees to be able to act like you. Thank you, I understand, and I'll return to work. After some small talk, Connor and I returned to our department. I was happy that my good-natured personality led to a change in company regulations, but it all started just because I happened to help owner Johnson's daughter. If not for that, the regulations might not have been reviewed. Thinking about this made me feel conflicted, but if the regulations were going to change, I felt motivated to continue helping others without worrying about being late. Thinking that this incident was now over, I resigned myself to the fact that my connection with Jessica would also end. After all, we lived in different worlds. Time passed as if nothing had happened, and I fully moved on from Jessica. Occasionally, my grandmother would mention Jessica, but it didn't bother me, and I responded casually while playing with my phone. Jessica, was it? I wonder how she's doing. I don't know, what do you think? Last week, she seemed fine when she came over. Oh, really? She came over. She came over. Jessica came. I was surprised and looked at my grandmother. Jess, I was weeding when someone called out from the roadside. I wondered who it could be, and it was Jessica. She asked, "Are you doing well? Is Ken at work? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Grandma, what did you say?" "I said we were fine and that Ken was at work." Then she left right away. Did I do something wrong? No, it's fine. I was just surprised to hear she came over. Let me know if she comes again. I struggled to maintain my composure. I hurried back to my room, took out my phone, and wrote a text to Jessica. I apologize for the late report. I have been attending work without fail since my return. I just heard from my grandmother that you visited our house last week. I must have caused you worry due to my lack of communication. I'm sorry. I reread the email several times before pressing the send button. Flustered, I put my phone in my pocket and waited for a reply, but instead, a call came through. Jessica prefers phone calls over texts, I thought as I answered. It's been a while. I thought you might be upset with me because I hadn't heard from you. I'm glad to hear you've returned safely, she said in a cheerful voice. Owner Johnson mentioned it to President Smith, right? That really helped. I heard the company is going to change its regulations because of it. Actually, I heard from my father that President Smith has known about you for a while. There were several reports of phone calls expressing gratitude from people you've helped. They didn't know who was behind the help since no name was mentioned, but whenever they received such calls, they found that it was always you who was late that day. Your performance was considered good by the previous manager. Despite the low evaluation due to your tardiness, it was strange that doing good deeds led to a low evaluation. So there was already talk in the company about accepting tardiness with valid reasons. So it wasn't just owner Johnson's intervention that led to the change in company policy. President Smith said that once the details were decided, he was planning to discuss it with my father. I was genuinely happy to hear that the company was considering changing its policies because of my actions. That's really nice to hear. It makes me happy. I'm glad for you. Please continue to help others. I'll also try to actively reach out to people in need. Thank you. I'm glad I texted you. So, since I hadn't properly thanked you for your help yet, would you like to go out for a meal this weekend? I was casually invited by Jessica and, on impulse, accepted. Since our lifestyles are so different, is it okay if we choose something I'm used to eating? What are you talking about? Haha. I work for a different company, unrelated to my father's business. My parents may be wealthy, but I don't have that much. Either of my brothers will likely take over the company. You won't get anything by dating me for the inheritance. Haha. Is that so? Too bad. Haha. Saying that, we both burst into laughter, decided on a place and time for our weekend meal, and then hung up the phone. Our dinner was at a tavern near the station. With Jessica by my side, I couldn't help but notice the jealous stares from the other male patrons. Feeling relaxed and happy with Jessica savoring the meal, I took the chance to ask when we could meet next and invited her on another date. I jokingly asked if I could bring my grandmother along, and to my surprise, Jessica readily agreed. It didn't take long for me to develop a fondness for her. Thinking how nice it would be if the day came soon when my grandmother could take care of our great-grandchildren, I enjoyed our delightful time together.